Someone who is here, I mean, he just came to London from Mexico just for this Kosmica, so it's something very special. And I recently met Juan Jose. He is an established artist in Mexico City. He's been around for a while. And if you let, so I'm going to say something, but we were having some drinks the other day, and he said that he was reaching his middle life crisis. So, so yeah, normally, some people will buy like, I don't know, a Lamborghini or something like that, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm building a satellite. That's gonna be my new goal. So he started just a few months ago, really, with the idea of putting something out there, and it's been a very interesting journey. So he's going to share it with us tonight.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm very glad to be here in London. I haven't been here, I think, in 20 years. So you cannot imagine how excited I am to be here tonight. Because from the moment that I got invited, I've really been looking forward to this evening. And a lot of people, even here in Arts Catalyst, did not believe that I was showing up. Well, this was not supposed to be on, it was just a note for myself. But October is a very weird month, and yesterday Steve Jobs passed away. So I just wanted to pay homage to him, because since 1984 I bought an Apple IIe. And it's just a person that taught me that thinking different is okay. So basically all the people that we own Apples today have this sort of religion. So basically I just wanted to mention that. And now that Naum has told the real reason about my building a satellite, because I was 50 last April, and there's several birthdays that I decided not to have, like 30 and 50. I was sort of thinking how to present this project, and there was different ways to present this little satellite, which I have a little model here. This is a little mock-up of what I'm trying to send to space. And the name of this little satellite is ULISES. And usually, when I present it, you know, I just go like this, because it's just like the way I play with it in the night, no? So I just go like beep, beep, beep. And I go into rooms with it like that. And just I like, you know, I explain a lot this project to people. So basically, I decided that the best way to show this project was more in a way of a journal, more in a way of the intimate experience that I've had with it. Because technically there's a lot of satellites that have been launched, but very few that have been launched as an art piece. So I prepared a little slideshow, and I want to start with my elementary school education, in which I remember to have learned that the atom was not divisible when I learned it. So it was the smallest thing that you could have in the universe. And since then, lots of things that I've learned, in fact, have been very, very wrong. So I'm sort of trying to retake knowledge. Another thing that happened last year, or the last couple of years, is that Mexico has gone into a drug war. So reality and security have become a horrible experience on the everyday life. And we've gotten over 30,000 deaths in relation with this drug war. And that was pretty much how the satellite idea became a project, in the fact of how to generate my own reality. And since now you know my real age, I was born in 1961, and space was the future. And I've had a very hard time talking to my students and people that are younger than me, because the idea of future is different in different generations. In my generation, future had hope. Nowadays, future is more of an immediate thing. It's like future doesn't exist, let's make it fast. So it's that spatial relationship of future with a lot of people that I deal with today that they are 30 years old or 35-year-old. And my relationship, I decided try to transmit it through this project. So bringing back the fact that I studied to become a photographer. So basically, my craft is advertising photography, which basically I know very little about anything. I know how to do a photograph. So my experience is that the best way to approach a problem is not knowing anything about it, because it's the only way to have the real problem seen or studied. And on the other hand, I decided that the only thing that really I like about life and art is the poetic experience. So I decided to approach launching a satellite. It had a lot to do with my youth, with Stanley Kubrick, 2001: Space Odyssey, and things like that, all that imaginary. And the other thing was to bring poet and poetic experience together. So I tried to go to the road of poiesis, and I had this phrase of Heidegger that underlines that the moment of pleasure is produced when something is away from its original position to become something else. So the idea of this satellite is actually becoming something else. And in Greek, poiesis has to do with the action that gives transformation and continuity to the world. So basically, a lot has to do with trying to regain a poetic experience and understand a simple question that I always ask myself every Monday, that says, where is the poet? There's a lot of people that know when I arrive to a party, they say, well, where is the bathroom? Where is the bar? But very few people sort of ask themselves, where is the poet? And it's very interesting that the organigram of this world does not have poets anymore. I got this email from Ivan yesterday, which is one of the people that are working on the satellite. And I didn't have time to translate it into English, but whoever knows Spanish can read it, and if not, I'll translate it. And it says, when I was a boy, I thought that astronauts were people that floated. Buddha, Neil Armstrong, Jesus, over the water, astronauts. An ice cream, a lemon ice cream on top of a soda, a little ducky in the bathtub, a lifesaver, an astronaut. Seagulls, dead seagulls on an oil gulf. Astronauts. Nonetheless, today I'm very confused. I am sure that I'm spinning around a planet with my brother on the side of me, and this metal thing looks like an insect, a lot of garbage on the earth to take them to their own system as one more treasure. And this is a story of Citlali Rodriguez. It's a book that is in the process. It's called Sect 1. So basically it was a reflection on how we saw astronauts, people that float. And it's October. Right now we are on the 7th, what date are we? 6th of October. It was the 4th of October of 1957 when the Sputnik went up. And part of my research took me to what exactly happened between Korolev and Brezhnev that day. And as it happens, everything that started all this space exploration had to do with the launch of a little thing that is more or less this size, called the Sputnik. And the literal translation is the satellite. So it's a satellite called the satellite. Pretty much like a river called the river, or a dog called the dog. And basically, the Russians, when we were trying to send the satellite up, Brezhnev was not very convinced with Korolev's theory that someone should send the satellite. It was pretty much a ridiculous idea. And there was a deal struck between Brezhnev and Korolev that if Korolev built a rocket that could have a transatlantic flight and hit the United States, they would let him have a satellite. And the 4th of October, they launched the little Sputnik, in which they decided to undesign the Sputnik. The Sputnik used to be a very complicated satellite, and they didn't have time to be the first and to make it complicated. So they actually sent a satellite that just beeped. And they beat the Americans, they beat a lot of people. And the Sputnik in Russia was not a very important thing that happened. The Sputnik actually came in the Pravda newspaper, probably in the 3rd or 4th page. It was the Western people that realized the importance of a satellite, and suddenly this single action went into the first pages of the Western Hemisphere, and then 3 or 4 days later, in Russia became big news. So there's actually a delay, if you like to watch it historically, between in Russia was their own news were 4 days later, and they thought of it as important 4 days later. So basically I started to think about how Ulysses, a very minimal act, how it could become important in changing reality. And Sputnik did that. Sputnik started the space race. So, you're not going to believe this, but one day I got a magazine, and if you read here, it says, satellite do it yourself. So, I was reading through Stan magazine, and I got this Scientific American, and they had this little article about how to do a satellite yourself. And I started reading through its pages, and it was a very complicated matter. I mean, this is no joke. So these are some pages of the article that made a little bit, very little sense about it. But there was like 2 lines here saying that there was a new generation of satellites coming up, and after the CubeSat, there was a satellite called the CubeSat, and basically it's a very simple. You can see here the blueprints. Oops, I don't know why it's working by itself, but I'm. 1 second. It's rebelling against my instructions. I'm going to rehearse that. 1 second. Here I'm back. So this is the very first mock-up model that we did. That it was uglier than this one. So it was like the first, and here you can see how a satellite is, and this is the tube that will eject from. And this is pretty much how the blueprints of inside are. So these are the solar cells, and this is like a small computer chip. This is like the transmitter, and this is a battery. So basically it's like a very simple artifact. It has a small chip, it has some solar cells, it has a battery, and it has a transmitting device. And here you can see more or less how it would look like. And you are seeing like in this way how the Gerber files would look like. I'm the director of a festival called Play. So basically we decided to make it as a project of the Play Festival. And one of the things that happens in Spanish is that the play word does not have a translation into Spanish. So the word play in Spanish works as teatro, jugar, tocar, but it's actually never the same metaphor, and not the metaphor of game and of playing. And on the other hand, play has a very nice thing to become game theory, which is actually ethics of the world. So we decided to be in this festival to put the satellites as the main theme and actually make it work as an instrument. So there's a difference when you launch space satellite from Germany or the United States than when you launch it from Mexico. Because Mexico has had only 11 satellites prior to this one launched. And most of the time they have been only commercial, TV, communications, some safety or security satellites. So we were trying to not only having a thing of a technical thing of sending a satellite, but actually creating something that I call poetic progression. We are very used to historic progression. And I decided that historic progression is taking us to a terrible crisis in the United States, Mexico, and the world, and Spain is bankrupt, and Greece is bankrupt. So I decided that the only way out is actually something that makes no sense and that is very creative in order to be able to get out of the crisis. So the first thing was the name of the satellite, ULISES. And it's named after this artist, this Mexican artist that was Ulises Carrion. And I'll make a brief comment about him, because he was an enthusiast of art mail. He was an editor of a magazine, Ephemera, dedicated to art other, everything that was non-commercial. And he emphasized communication, art to be used instead of being exchanged. And he was great interest in the shaping of networks. So basically, it redefined what the satellite should be. So Ulysses the First is an instrument. The object of art, as Duchamp would say it, is not the objective of art. It's only the center of discussion. So it was very important that this small thing, we really didn't care what will happen to it. It was very important for it to have it as the imaginary trigger, that it would do the artist create an imaginary setup. Here's one of the first sketches. And of course, a lot of this has to do with the misunderstanding of McLuhan. The medium is the massage. So Ulysses becomes an instrument to think about the relationship between medium and message. The whole project is conceptualized like an opera, because we're not very sure if we're ever going to reach space. Not because we don't want, because anything can explode. The Department of Defense gives us a lot of trouble in order for launching. We're having trouble getting a space launch approved by the Pentagon. We need a person from the Pentagon to look at this, so this is not a weapon of mass destruction. So basically, everything that was happening to me, I decided that it was an opera. And in the 16th century, the opera was a hybrid in which it defined music and theater to make it easy to people. So I decided that the same term in the 21st century, it just adds science, experience, performance, happening, whatever happens, this is the opera. So it has little to do with transmitting an opera. The experience is the opera. So here are some more drawings, very Michelangelo. The other thing is, who was going to be the creator of the work that was going to be in this small satellite, in Ulysses? And I decided that it shouldn't be a person, that it had to be a collective. So one day, one morning, eating my breakfast, I decided that I was going to found the Mexican Space Collective. You know, these people didn't know they were going to be a space collective, but I was going to define 11 people that were going to become the Mexican Space Collective. So we decided to do the logo of the collective. So Ulysses the First was the main logo, and then you have the Mexican Space Collective. And here are some of the names of the people that I called, and I didn't give them a lot of choice. I told them, now you become part of the Mexican Space Collective. So I talked to Arcángel Constantini, Arturo Márquez, Marcela Armas, Hugo Solís, and some of these people are like, for example, Waxheads, these people here. They're a rock group, and they're into fusion. So these people didn't know anything about satellites. Now, Arcángel Constantini is an electronic artist, and Arturo Márquez is a classical composer. So I called people that were very far from each other in order to recreate or to start creating things that had to do with the satellite. And it was pretty much in purpose to try to make people that couldn't understand each other. Because some people, like Ariel Guzik, just does not come out of his studio. He doesn't like people. But that's the problem with the collective today. We try to put the modern view of a collective should be people that are for and against things. We have to learn to live together. And in many occasions, we get together people that think alike. I think we have to do the exercise of people that do not think alike. So I got into a lot of trouble bringing together these people because no one thinks alike. And I'm the only person that actually puts them together and makes them work together. So many of them quit every 2 months. So I get a phone call and says, Marcela is quitting. So I have to call Marcela, and I was in Boston when she decided to quit. And I call Marcela and says, inhale, exhale. Marcela, you are not quitting. I don't even ask why. I just call back and I say, Marcela, you are not quitting. And the exercise is a very Zen thing. Inhale deeply, exhale deeply. You are back into the collective. I hang up. As a concept within the dynamic of contemporary work, the dynamics of contemporary issues have to do with learning to be in a community. And the problem is that pattern of behavior has to do with competition. And we have forgotten about cooperation. So the collective learning has to do with the concept of relearning cooperation. We're not going to get out of the hole if we don't learn that. If we keep competing with each other, we're just going to make deeper the hole that we are at. So we are the collective, the brainstorming. And you can say, Ayumi, my assistant. Of course, she left me because she wants to become a shaman. And we have people of the art of the rock group. And we all started working in November and December of 2010. And here's Marcela, here's Arcangel. And we're trying to read the instructions of how to build a satellite. So, as you see, we have severe problems. So. And you can see the Christmas tree here. So we started in Christmas. And people is sort of like very puzzled about it. And they are saying, well, we have to see the satellite. And of course the satellite was stuck in customs because the Department of Defense would not give us an export license, because we had to sign that we wouldn't re-export the things to a terrorist country. Culture is essential to the creations of social tissue. If you forget such elementary concepts, your social structure falls apart. Mexico is having one of its worst crises in modern history, an internal civil war disguised as a mafia war. ULISES is the proposition that any reality is possible for anyone. If 11 people that have no knowledge to launch a satellite actually make it to launch a satellite, what we are is actually proving that you can build any reality you want. Ulysses' first lecture was in April of 2001, and I'm here in Colombia sort of explaining the project when nothing was done, pretty much a very early stage. But we were very daring, and we decided to do a second presentation at the MIT. And that's where people really judge your work. This is just a fun photograph. Here's Buzz Aldrin, the second guy to be on the moon. This is the guy who, Michael Massimino, that is the guy who has repaired the Hubble twice. This is Dava Newman. She's in charge of redesigning the spacesuit for Mars. And this guy is in charge of designing the rooms of the orbital station. So basically, I really went to talk to people that really had good questions about what I was doing. And for them, the poetic progression was a real window that they had never thought about it. Because scientists have historic progression in their mind. They want to be incredibly logical. And the fact that this little project was incredibly logical really puzzled them. Well, I got an autograph photograph here. So this is, I just brought it to brag. And I want to tell you what is happened, because it has become a real life experience on the fact of timing. Because I was also involved in a congress on exploration, and I come to realize that we come to the end of humanism as a tendency. We are now, everyone looks at us as an economic theory. There is also the end of the space shuttle, and they are trying to market the space as a private business. There is also the birth of new poles of development and new players on space. And the timing of the launching of the China module is great because it was just last week that China did a launching that is as significant as the Sputnik, because it's the total change of a pole of power. Maybe we are not recognizing it today, but it will be very relevant in the future. The other thing that I learned is that we need someone to create an imaginary. Jules Verne created the imaginary of the last century. It was not the astronauts, it was not the scientists who created the need of exploring new places. It was Jules Verne, the person that generated the imaginary landscape. And it's incredible that today we need the new Jules Verne to come into our lives and to create a new imaginary thing. And it's on the field, or in the field of the artists, not in the field of the scientists to do this. And of course, here is Captain Nemo, there, projected. And here you have the map of all the extraordinary voyages of Jules Verne. You can see it there. And here, I don't think you can see, the new modest exploration beyond the end of the world, remote sensing, broadly defined, non-extreme exploration, distributed frontiers, rediscovery, deeper experience, higher experience. Nobody knows which way exploration is going. And of course, I just decided to put this of T.S. Eliot just because I was coming to London. I thought it was politically correct. No? We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started. And know the place for the first time, through the unknown, unremembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, have heard in the stillness between two waves of the sea. And here, very concerned scientists at MIT looking at Ulysses. I mean, this was like my little stand that I was displaying there. And people had a lot of questions. It really got the attention of the scientists. And this is only gossip. This slide has to do with gossip. There, in this picture, here, we have Josh Simpson. Josh Simpson does worlds, glass worlds. So he's decided that glass is these things that is the new anthropology. So he buries his worlds twice a month. He buries 2 worlds a month somewhere. So he travels around the world burying his glass sculptures, but he's married to an astronaut. So the last time that I had seen him, I had invited him to Mexico to come to a glass congress, and he decided, well, he didn't decide, he didn't show up. And he was very afraid he had burned his bridges. And he was explaining to me that his wife was an astronaut, and the same day that my festival was on, there was a launching of the space shuttle, and she had to go to the space station. And it was incredible that you can see him with the phone. We got a phone call from the space station at that time. He was explaining it to me. So we had 45 minutes talking to his wife in the space station, and it really, I have never felt such an eerie sensation, because it's just sort of, it's an experience that you are not asking from the project. It's just giving it to you. So in 45 minutes, the space station goes around, so you cannot listen to them again. So that's why they call, and this guy here is also part of my gossip. This guy was commissioned to make a love letter to NASA. So it's one of those things that you say, I'm going to sit in the very last row, and I'm going to leave as soon as they turn off the lights, because, I mean, how corny can it be? Well, I was invited by the artist to sit in the second row, so I could not leave the room. But strange enough, he's an amazing narrator, and he narrates the history of NASA through a love story of 2 people that, of course, and as any love story, are continuously fighting. And he portrays the Apollo 13 story, the teacher who dies in the explosion of the space shuttle, and not only that, the Voyager. And what is incredible about the Voyager is that the emergency part of building the Voyager was actually making the musical record that took on it. So a lot of Ulysses has to do with the Voyager. The Voyager, they decided to make a record. And the difficult part that they had to find was a speech of Kierkegaard. And of course, it was the day prior in which they had to build this record that they found the speech of Kierkegaard in a Hindu restaurant. And what is very amazing is the fact that how he reflects when some alien civilization in 5 million years finds this record. And I don't know what they will think. Maybe they'll think we like to dance. Another thing that I found at MIT is that this is the same technology for looking for exoplanets. Exoplanets are planets that are very similar to Earth. So Ulysses technology is being used also scientifically for something that is called satellite constellations. Of course, this is a fluke. I mean, I chose this technology because it was cheap. This is just like a very neat personal thing that is the baby shower. When we got the first parts of the satellite, we decided to do a baby shower. So here we are, the whole space collective, you know, celebrating the first piece of the satellite. And one of the things that we have learned as we were receiving the things is you have to use the oldest technology available. You cannot send new technology to space. Why? Because it fails. I mean, we have problem putting a computer to the projector. Now imagine if you are going to send it to 300 kilometers in orbit. So one of the things is we're programming this satellite with BASIC. And I'm going to show you the fact that once you purchase a satellite, you realize you need a rocket to put it in space. So it's a very strange phone call, the one that you have to say, excuse me, but can I buy a rocket launch from you? And once you get a voice on the other side of the phone, you don't believe it that he actually has a rocket. So I found a very strange place, which is called Mojave, which when I drove there, I thought I had a meeting in an office for 2 hours with someone. And then I found that Mojave is an air and space port. And it's in the middle of the desert. It's a cemetery of planes. And here I am at the rocket factory, actually going to check if there's such thing as a rocket that can send my satellite to space. And I'm with the CEO. This lady here is called Randa. And Randa used to be an experimental musician in the 70s that at some point went to a launch of a rocket, and she said she was baptized by the rocket. So when you go to the launching of a rocket, the vibration of launching a rocket does baptize you, and you can never forget it. And these people for 35 years have worked in order to get new technology of rockets to space and making it cheap. This is the testing facility, and in the back here you can see the cemetery of airplanes. And every time they do testing here, they have like an underground room, so in case something goes wrong. But there's always chosen one person to go first, because it's the person that has to kill the snakes. So a person has to go downstairs and figure out how many snakes have gone for the last month there and kill the very poisonous ones. Of course, here's a photograph of the rocket, and this is Rob. This is the inventor of the rocket, and he's sort of making new rockets that work with turpentine. And the technology that is being used today is cryogenics. It's basically frozen oxygen, but that's very expensive. So I've learned that now you can send rockets that are turpentine and nitrogen, liquid nitrogen. So basically those things are cheaper and working better. So here's Randa showing us where the launching is going to be from. And the launching of Ulysses is going to be from Tonga. Tonga in the South Pacific, because it's the Tonga spaceport. The King of Tonga has donated some land because he wants to put his island in a new future race. So basically that's the map of Tonga, and the spaceport is going to be here. And here's the exact map where Tonga is in the South Pacific. So this is pretty much how the rocket will look like. This is one of the rockets that is being built at Mojave Desert. And Mojave is the main place for private investment in space. And this is pretty much how the launching rocket of many nanosatellites will be. So basically, you will send like 20 or 30 nanosatellites in one launch. And of course, well, here's a technical description of what it is. And we're going to launch the satellite at 300 kilometers in polar orbit. It basically will last for 4 months going around the globe. And it will be in polar orbit, and it will use the rotation of Earth to actually cover the whole world. And pretty much the statics of how it will be covering the world is pretty much like this. So the world is rotating, and the satellite is rotating around, so it generates this sort of spiral. Well, it's launching from the South Pacific, and this is also more or less how the footprint of the satellite will be. I decided that the Mexican Space Collective should have a brainstorm. So I asked all the artists to generate projects, and it didn't matter if it was 1 project, 2 projects, and it didn't matter the price. Since this was a creative and imaginary process, I decided that the brainstorm was going to be the first exhibition. So on the 23rd of June at Play Festival, we had the first time that all the ideas were shown. And over here, you see, besides of the Mexican Space Collective, other artists decided to join in. But it was sort of a spontaneous. There was no questions asked, they just sent the work. So here I have a satellite made out of marble stone. So people were sending all sorts of fun things. And here you can see the exhibition, how it worked. And you can see all the ideas, scores being portrayed. And here we have an interactive room in which you can see an animation that is actually a simulation of a satellite going in orbit. And each orbit, one different project of the artist lights up, and you can hear the music or the sound effect that it will have. Well, here you have details of the simulation, and here you have a photograph of the satellite. And here are some of the sketches, ideas of different people, how they've been sort of imagining how to become an astronaut. And I do not know why it's not changing. My computer does not respond to me anymore. It froze. These things don't behave. Excuse me? There it is. So this satellite has a haiku poem written in one of the panels. And this haiku panel has 3 lines as a poem. The title of the poem has 26 pages. So artists really become like very creative on generating content for this thing. And this is many of the sketches that have been generated to create the satellite. And these are some of the ideas that some of the artists have come. This is called micro passengers. And this is petri dishes with bacteria. And they're to be sent in the satellite, and they're going to generate their own energy. And once that energy becomes like a battery full energy, they'll become a soundscape. They'll become a kapow or whatever it is what the artist will be. And this is from Gilberto Esparza. This piece is the DNA of corn done into music by Marcela Armas. So the screen looks pretty much like this, and this is guanina, thiamina, the different DNA elements, and that becomes pretty much like a music chamber. And also Marcela decided to generate an antenna artifact to catch the signal of the satellite. So you catch the signal, and there's a speaker here, and the speaker has this wire that goes to this filament, and it actually makes vibrate the filament, and it becomes like a graphic light. And the redness of the filament has to do with the volume. Of course, Ivan Puig decided to make a pre-Hispanic infinity, and that means that this thing is supposed to be a pre-Hispanic thing or artifact. And I'm going to play. Am I plugged to a sound thing or no?
1 second.
I suddenly realized that I was not plugged. I felt abandoned by technology.
We are.
Yes? This score is dividing by half the score every time to infinity. And it's infinity way to see sound, because each time it makes it half. So it starts from one point, it makes it half, starts from one point, it makes it half. So it's basically the same visualization of infinity, but making it musical through the... This is called music without beginnings. And it also, at the same time in Spanish, has a double sense because it's without principles. And the thing is from the lowest tone that the ear can hear to the highest tone that the ear can hear. And it's to be transmitted by the satellite, and actually you are never sure if you are listening to it or not, because you just get the sensation of sound. And all these projects, is not that they're going to be inside the satellite, it's just an imaginary project. I have Arcangel. Arcangel wants to send an ohm. So he wants to generate a magnetic field that will only transmit that in orbit and generating like good karma for mankind. And this is the sculpture in marble, just another way to see it. This is another type of scores. It's a visual score done on a mathematical, the aura, the golden zone. This is some sculptures that were done because people would not believe us or would not understand what the satellite was, because people said, well, you're not serious. Of course, I had to show this letter that says, Dear Juan, we're officially informing you, our payload clients, that the first orbital launch of the Neptune rocket carrying your satellite, 21 other satellites builders, has been rescheduled. And of course, I've gotten like 10 letters of reschedule. And this is just, again, gossip sharing with you. This is the Mexican Space Agency that wrote to me, just saying that they will offer me a job next year. And this is the Technological Institute saying that my work is of no interest to them. And here's a graphic designer that did a portrayal of the satellite as a Region 4 satellite. So in video you have Region 1 for the United States, Mexico is Region 4, India is Region 5, so this one was the Region 4 satellite, and it's made of a kind of garbage, 2 fly swappers, you know, these stop corkers, and it's the Made in Mexico seal. And I presented this poster at ICEA 2 weeks ago, and they thought I was going to be launching that one. So this has to be, they didn't understand the humor of it. So basically this poster had to be taken out because people said, you are very daring. Before it becomes garbage, you are sending garbage. So this became like another project. And I would like, after showing you very quickly this project, because it just has so many angles and so many ways to see it, is something that I like from the Seattle chief that says, you do not inherit the present from the past. You actually borrow it from the future. And that's what we have to do today to generate the present that will take us out of the whole crisis that we are living, is we need to borrow it from the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the same. Any questions? Well, I have one. Well, no, it's
Yes, I'm listening.
okay. Wait, how are you building one? Or is there like, do you have any plans for building more than one in
Well,
the future?
the problem is that I have to build many, because when I ask one board to be made in Newark, they said, well, the minimum order is 10. So I have a budget problem, because now I have to make 10, because you don't buy one transistor, you buy 300 transistors. Or you don't buy only one board, you buy 10 boards. And also another thing happened is, let's assume that in the last minute something fails with your satellite. You need to have like 2 or 3 spare satellites, because there is a test of vibration. And every satellite goes through a vibration test. And even very professional satellites, 80% of satellites that are going through the vibration test do not make it out of the test. So people destroy their satellites prior to launching. So we have many. We want to have, but this is new thing that has happened. We didn't realize that we had to make that many. Anyone?
Is there a website or documentation of this exhibition that you just showed us?
Well, there is a website that is the Altamira Cave website, altamiracave.com, which is never on time. I mean, what you're going to see is something that happened like 3 months ago. But you can look there, and we're upgrading every time. But we've been so busy actually generating all these things that the website has like the first project that was projected, in which I decided that it had to be a soccer team. I decided that a global project had to do with soccer, because there are more countries in FIFA than there are in the UN. So I counted how many countries were in the FIFA, and there were 205, and I counted how many countries were at the UN, and there were only 196. So I decided that soccer was global and the UN was not. So I came up that this opera had to be a soccer opera, originally. So you will find something totally diametrically different to what I said today. So you'll find how this opera has to be soccer, and the 11 people have to be because it's the soccer team, and how the FIFA, you'll find this story, which is also nice. It's another one. It's a different reality. But if you go to altamira.cave, it works a lot like as a notebook more than a website, because I think I started it in 1997, and I have not learned more than I learned those 6 months. So everything is HTML, it's very clunky. And since I have very little time, my writing name that I use in all as a signature, as my literary signature, is not Hamlet. So that shows you that my writing is always incomplete. I prefer to warn you now before I send you there. Any other question?
Yeah, is there, where in the rocket, how do you put
This?
how do you put the artwork in it so that it doesn't get destroyed, and can you access it once it's on space, like if someone finds it on space?
Okay, no, well, it's an algorithm that goes inside here. So it's in a computer, it's programmed in basic language, and it's transmitted through civil band. So actually a lot of taxi drivers and amateur radio people will get it. And of course they will not recognize it. So if you are, I don't know, intense enough, you can catch it in 344 megahertz, and the window of opportunity is 10 minutes 3 times a day in each part of the world. So we are doing a simulation in the website, but the work is actually there. Now, let me tell you that this is the cheapest budget of sending something to space. So a lot of things can happen before we reach orbit, in the sense that the rocket might blow up, the rocket might be fall somewhere else, this might reach orbit and might freeze or be fried by strange radiation. So there is a lot of things that happens when you are working with the space. No one assures you safety. You know, it's one of those things that if you go there, you might get killed. And so whenever I go to a rocket test, what Randa says to me, we're hoping something fails. Because if nothing fails now, we do not know what is going to fail in orbit. And the problem is that to today, all the rocket tests have not failed. So we're really doing like a very great attempt for this, but when your budget is this limited, we're working with cards. You know, we're building with whatever we have, and that's why also there's the process of building. What I want is for you to get into the attitude of building these things, not actually making sure that it works, but it's just the attitude of creating another. Each one of us can create another reality, and if that I'm a photographer, can do it, pretty much any other profession is a little bit better than that. So you can do it. So that's pretty much what the attitude of the project wants to portray. Another question?
Hi.
Hello.
I just kind of love that you've made your own satellite because you can.
I'll tell you later on about my car.
Off the back of that, from what you learned, would you be able to estimate what is the very cheapest you could make your own satellite for?
The strange starter price, if you are just sending your tennis shoe to space, is for about $8,000 or $10,000. That's a very starting point. But then you get into trouble because you want it to beep, or you want to transmit, or you want for it to do something. And that's when heavy engineering comes in. And once heavy engineering is, how many engineers do you want to work with you, or what type of engineers they want to work with you? And then you have the problem of robotics. And then the people that are actually going to do the circuits, and the people that are going to do the dry assembly, and the series assembly, and then the people that are going to do the testing. Now, our first transmission testing was a very nice one that says, ULISES works. We did testing, and we were able to transmit to 50 centimeters. So we were having here the chip, and we were transmitting to this radio. Now you have to take your satellite to a direct line for 300 kilometers. The other thing is, I never realized that you have to go and check if the rocket company exists. Because, you know, you make a phone call, and, excuse me, do you send rockets up? And someone in the other line says, yes, you know, send us $12,000. And you're not going to send $12,000 to a voice. You actually have to go there and see something. So the traveling to a place to corroborate things is a lot of the process. And once you are there, you realize how many more things you can do, how many more things and people you can meet. So for me, I'm overwhelmed with experience. I don't need to put it in a museum anymore. I'm not interested in galleries. I just, you know, have this, how do you say, I'm like addictive. I'm like an addict to the adrenaline, no? So I go there and I get into the space, I don't know what, and then I get into something that rotates, and then I meet 6 astronauts, and then I talk about the Chinese. So what happens is the whole process is overwhelming. Is if I do it or not, just what I've been living this year, you cannot narrate it back. Did I answer probably?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Somebody else? Nobody else has a question? I was very clear in my exposure.
Okay. Well, Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Juan
much.
Jose.